As Sean Payton and Bo Nix prepare for their second season together, we'll tell you why the Denver Broncos have a culture that makes them contenders in 2025 on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Broncos Country, what's happening? Welcome into another episode. Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there on Broncos Country. Thank you so much for tuning in and making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. And if you're not yet an everydayer, become one by hitting that subscribe or that follow button wherever you get your podcast or on YouTube, so you never miss out on all your Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, more every single day, all year long. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports.
And I'm Sayre Bedinger, site expert at predominantlyorange.com.
And here's what you're going to get on today's episode of the show. Culture is so important, and we're going to go through and tell you why the Denver Broncos in 2025 have a Super Bowl culture that circulates through the entire locker room and even away from the facility with these players there. We'll also highlight why Bo Nix and other guys on the defense like Patrick Surtain are the biggest leaders in 2025 and which young voices can emerge as leaders this upcoming season. And then we're going to talk about why chemistry matters for a young team and the Broncos, why they're on the right path with the group that they have currently intact here. Get all that on today's episode of the show. Sayre, look, some people are going to think that this is a hot take here when we say that the Broncos, they have a Super Bowl culture. And so many people are going to say, well, what does that mean? The Broncos, they made it to the playoffs, but they didn't win. How can they have a Super Bowl culture? It's not just about, Sayre, getting to the postseason. It's not just about winning, but in order to get far and to go to great lengths as a team, you have to have a good culture and a good foundation. And this dates back to how you build your roster. And this is the early stages of getting these guys together at training camp throughout the regular season. The grind that culture comes before you even make it to the postseason. That culture comes before you even make it to the big game.
It does. It starts from the top of the organization on down. And without vision, people perish, Cody. That's exactly one of the principles I think that this ownership has embraced in terms of we see what the vision is for this team under a head coach like Sean Payton, who's been to that mountaintop in the past. We see the vision with a franchise quarterback in place. We're investing in the right people for the organization. It all kind of comes together to create this melding pot that is the culture of your team. I think one of the most staggering examples that you've ever given is the one where there was guys that were chanting, jokingly, but seriously at the same time, what was it, Cabo on the field at the end of the season, kind of like getting ready for their vacations after the year. That culture is bred from a place of you've gotten too used to losing. You've gotten too used to collecting your paycheck. And I think one of the biggest things that gets underrated about an NFL team is how do you motivate a bunch of grown men who are getting paid millions of dollars to care as much about winning as they do about collecting their paychecks? That to me is what creates a Super Bowl type of culture, is guys who want to win, who want to be in Denver in order to win. And I think the Broncos are building that.
What is Sean Payton and George Payton? What have they historically said here that they want to know about players, right? When we go through the NFL Combine, the pre-draft process, what is it that they have said to us specifically? They want to find guys that love football, right? And when you have this new concept in the college football realm where NIL is very present, you learn about which guys love the money or love football, right? You can have NIL money and still love football. Bo Nix was a great example of that. He had NIL money, but this is a guy who loves football and is trying to figure out, like, when you get to the NFL, it really is about, okay, hey, guys are trying to get paid 100%. But can you have that balance where guys obviously want to be taken care of financially, but they also love the game so much they're willing to do whatever it takes. They're willing to be a great teammate. They're willing to sacrifice their own selfish desires for the greater good of the team. That starts at the top, right? And I think for Sean Payton coming into 2023 here for this Broncos team, there was a culture that you had mentioned earlier that was present previously, where this was a team that was so used to losing games that they were almost kind of accepting of it in a sense, where you did have some guys that at the end of a huddle, toward the end of the season, were like, all right, 1, 2, 3, Cabo. And Nick Bonitto's like, wait a minute. No, like, this is not what I want to be part of, like, where I'm at and what my NFL career is going to be. Like, Nick was very on the record about that. And those guys aren't here anymore. The Broncos and Sean Payton clearly have moved on from that, because now you have a culture where you've moved on from some of those guys, and now you've allowed some of your younger voices to have a say in that room, right? You still have some veteran guys. We'll talk about them here as the show goes on. But when you hear the message from Sean Payton, and this is what he said to us as well in the offseason program, his message was to come here to Denver to win championships, not to just be like, all right, we're going to win games and that's it. He wants to win championships. And he said inside that locker room, the players understand that message and they're bought in on that message because they want to win championships too. And it's tough because there's 31 other teams. You're battling 31 other cultures. You're battling 31 other realms of different talent and skill sets that ultimately could get in the way of what you want to achieve. When you look at it from that standpoint, Sayre, the idea of winning a Super Bowl is so incredibly difficult. And luckily the Broncos, they've won 3 over the course of their history. But that standard and that message, it starts and ends with Sean Payton. And I think what Sean has been able to do by getting rid of those guys that didn't necessarily fit that message, you can look at Randy Gregory, Frank Clark, a handful of other guys. Sean's fingerprints are all over this football team. And you also see it in the way that this team has bucked some of the trends that they've been in for the last handful of years.
Yeah, it's been great to see some of those ugly streaks ending. The streak against Kansas City, right? The streak against the Raiders. I mean, you could go back to a couple seasons ago with the streak against Buffalo in Buffalo ending, and a number of others. The playoff drought, obviously, being the most notable at this point, but also the streak of not drafting a quarterback that can actually be your franchise guy. I think that that's a huge indicator of the culture in Denver being the culture between, you could argue, the general manager and the head coach. How many people assumed that was going to go sour because of who they presumed Sean Payton to be? And those guys are working really well together, and they work well with the ownership. The ownership group is willing to do whatever resource wise in order to make this team better, whether it's replacing the field on a moment's notice, the grass on the field, literally having it flown in from Arizona or whatever it is, for just one regular season game to make sure the players are safe, to the training staff, to the investment in free agency, to whatever this team needs, they are going after it. And I think it does help a little bit to have a villain that you're kind of, you have the Chiefs in the division. Everybody wants to beat the Chiefs. The Chiefs are, regardless of what the Eagles did in the Super Bowl, I think everybody wants to beat the Chiefs the most out of any NFL team. And I think that that's going to be the case for the next couple of years still. So having them at the top of the division sort of gives the Broncos a little extra measure of, okay, yeah, we've struggled to win in recent years, but also there's like this villain that we could be the team to take them down. We could be the team to end their dynasty, so to speak. And I think that does help with the team culture as well.
Well, I know that Sean Payton doesn't like the survey, right? The NFLPA player survey. But when you look at the overall results of that and ownership getting a high mark by the players, whereas the grading criteria says that players feel like ownership is committed to winning, finding ways to win and doing whatever they can to put the team in a position to win. Greg Penner has obviously done that since coming on board. You've seen him exhaust almost every resource. And when you have the cash richest ownership group in all of American sports, and the players are seeing that investment, that commitment from the top level, because there are some teams that don't have an ownership that does those little things that show like, hey, we want to win. Like, we're committed to winning. The Broncos see that. And so I think it motivates the players inside that locker room. You see a commitment to building a brand new team facility as well. These are the things that will give these players what they feel like is going to be an edge this upcoming season. And they're a young team, and we've seen them grow and learn. Like, there's been times this year where we really wanted to see what this team is made of, right? What's the fortitude? When they lost that heartbreaker against Kansas City, and it was tough. Like, I don't really have an emotional investment in the outcome of games, right? Because I have to come here and do a show and deliver. We took about 30 to 45 minutes after that game to be like, wow, like, we were gutted for the Broncos after that loss to Kansas City. And so much all week long, we were saying there's so much pressure on this team to respond after that type of loss. And what do? They come out and they blow the brakes off of Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons. So we saw different measures saying, hey, this is a team that's resilient. They got the mental fortitude and the makeup to be able to do that. And all those reasons, plus another year together, I think that the Broncos have a Super Bowl culture, and hopefully they can go a little bit further this upcoming season. That's the hope to it. But Broncos Country, want to hear your thoughts on whether or not you believe this Broncos team has a Super Bowl culture, what it means, because it's not just getting to the Super Bowl. It's the things and the team makeup that you have that's going to lead you through the entire regular season to the playoffs to potentially, hopefully, a Super Bowl. I think Denver has everything that they need to become a Super Bowl contender, and the culture is a big reason why that is the case. But we're not done yet. We still got a lot to break down as it pertains to culture and why Denver is a contender here in this category. And a lot of it has to do with some of the leaders on their team, including Bo Nix, Patrick Surtain. What is their leadership style, and how does it influence this team going forward? We'll break that down and much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Broncos Country. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment that's designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. And unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast. On average, in 15 minutes, and effects can last up to 36 hours. So you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right.
Cody, with any product that I purchase, always I check the customer reviews. You can read real customer reviews on the Rugiet website, and those help a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. So head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. Leaders on the team matter, especially when it comes to building a culture that can win a title in today's NFL. We've seen it time and time again. You see it with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. As much as Broncos Country may hate those guys, they've got a lot figured out when it comes to their leadership, when it comes to the players, the coaches, everybody working together, everybody working towards a common goal. So how are the Broncos going to build that same thing? Well, they've got the players that are going to help them do exactly that. And that's what we're going to talk about here today on the show. And look, Broncos Country, we appreciate you so much for rocking with us this offseason. Broncos just released some fan dates out there for training camp. Hope you get a chance to go out and see the team. I know Cody will be out there for the majority of training camp, and it's going to be an exciting time. You get to see this culture on the field. And we heard a lot at OTAs and minicamp, Cody, about Bo Nix really taking that next step in his leadership, in his command of the huddle, command of the offense, and just kind of the way that he's playing a little bit more loose out there. I think we'll see more of that at training camp as well. Bo is one of the biggest leaders on this team entering 2025. I think last year you figure the quarterback's going to be one of your team captains, right? But this year's a little bit different. He's not just having the captain's C slapped on his chest and they're manifesting like this guy's going to be our leader. Now he truly is the leader of this team.
Yeah, this is Bo's team. And I think Bo earned that even early on last year. You talk to other guys like Mike McGlinchey, you hear from other players offensively and defensively. They said Bo came in, he earned that. For him to be, what was it, the first rookie? Who's the last rookie to be nominated a captain, like rookie quarterback to be nominated a captain by their players? I can't remember who.
Yeah, I don't even remember.
I think, Trevor Siemian wasn't a rookie, even though he won a little bit of captainship. But the players voted on Bo Nix to become a team captain last year as a rookie. And the way that he did things behind the scenes, he earned the respect of the team. And look, as a rookie, even if you get drafted first overall, you're not just going to come and be like, all right, hey, this is my ship, I run it. No, so much in an NFL locker room, you have to go out there and you have to earn that from the guys that have been playing this game for a long time. Bo did that. Bo never had any ego about it. And that was something that was present very early on. And really, I think last year for Bo, the one thing he'll even admit to you that he even talked to us about last season was there were times throughout the season, especially maybe in the middle to late stretch, where Bo's like, I'm not going to be ultra hard on these guys. Like, I'm going to talk to them and I'm going to be accountable on my end too, especially when I make a mistake. He said, but really it was this playing out process as what can he do, right? How can he motivate these guys? How can he be a leader, right? He can't just go up to a guy he has no relationship equity with and curse him out saying, you didn't run your right route. Like, Bo understood the process of this is very much, it's not just a you thing, it's a me thing as well. Like, we both have to be on the same page when he's talking to a receiver or a route, and he's not going to dish it without being able to take it. And he expects guys to hold him accountable as well. That to me is what I view as a leader here for Bo. He was vocal last year, and he didn't have to be this rah guy. But I mean, Sayre, let's look at some examples of leadership here. Anytime that there's a negative play, what do we look at? Body language, right? Bo never came off the field last season and never displayed any negative body language. He was always upbeat. Leadership could even be maybe he's got that Ferris Bueller in him, like Sean Payton is dishing it to him a little bit. And he's got conviction. He's firing back at Sean Payton a little bit. I think that's, in a sense, leadership. I think that commands respect from your teammates because they're like, hey, Sean rules with an iron fist, but Bo's not afraid to challenge him if he believes he's right on something. That, to me, I think is big. Bo is, when you look at the offensive side, well, I think when you look at the team, he is the most important leader that this organization has right now from a player standpoint. But there on the offensive side, there are a handful of other guys who are leaders as well. Courtland Sutton is one that Sean Payton has highlighted extensively.
Yeah, and he showed up to minicamp, obviously, without a new contract in place, as far as any of us knows, right? I mean, who knows what's going on there behind the scenes for the Broncos these days? Things always seem to trickle out well after they're already done. But Courtland is in a contract year. He's obviously a big leader on this team in terms of the example that he sets. We saw the picture of him out there with Pat Bryant at minicamp and just kind of giving him some instructions or pointers, or maybe just shooting the breeze with him. I have no idea what he was saying, but it was very reminiscent of you and I have talked about this when Courtland was first coming into the league, kind of Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders helping take him and those young receivers under their wings as well, and really making an impression in that way and showing the young guys how it's done. And I think that's one of the things that impresses me the most about Courtland Sutton. The thing that I love about, too, a guy like Mike McGlinchey on the offense, Cody, is that he's a leader in terms of he's probably got the most experience of, at least on the offense that I can think of off the top of my head, in terms of guys who have been in big games, guys who have won a lot of games in the NFL. And he's got a lot of experience doing that. And yet he's taken that sort of support approach to a young quarterback. I think that's a great example of leadership right there, is to say, hey, I'm going to speak up when needed, and I'm going to be that strong veteran voice on this team. But also, I don't care if the quarterback's younger than me. I don't care what his experience level is. Like, I'm going to show you that I got that guy's back. I like that about Mike McGlinchey, and then that he's kind of been that way. So I think offensively, you've got some of your strongest, maybe more vocal leaders. And I think defense is where, Cody, I'm interested to see who steps up in that way, because there's guys that are energetic. There's guys who set the example. There's a lot of different ways that the defense sets an example of leadership. But again, like you said with Bo Nix, it's not really a rah-rah type of guy on that side of the ball.
Yeah, Pat Surtain. Look, Pat Surtain is not the rah-rah type of guy. I think with the defensive guys, he doesn't have to give any motivational speeches. He's very much like, let's go take care of business. He leads by example. This is a guy who locks in, knows when to flip the switch. I would say if we look at other defensive leaders beside him, I think Drake Greenlaw certainly has those characteristics, was a key leader for that San Francisco 49ers defense alongside Fred Warner. So, he's learned some things from Fred, but he's also exemplified those things on the field. I think Talanoa Hufanga at safety is also a guy who's got great leadership skills. I've seen it firsthand so far in OTAs and mandatory minicamp. The way he goes about collaborating with guys, getting guys on the same page. He leads by example. Jonathan Cooper might be that rah-rah, give you a fiery speech type of guy. But, Jonathan Cooper's also a great leader. Nick Bonito is a great leader as well. These are guys that are willing to speak with the media, even when moments are tough. Like Mike McGlinchey, I'll give him a lot of credit, always meets with us no matter how good or how bad things are throughout the course of a season. That's a big part of being a leader as well, willingness to be open and to talk to the media at times in those situations. In your opinion, who could be maybe a young guy that maybe a second or third year player, or maybe even a rookie, in your opinion, you feel like can look at these guys and then become a leader, to have a young voice? Because that's what Sean wants. Sean wants this locker room to have a voice, but he doesn't want it to come from the same guys, right? You got your designated leaders, your captains, but ideally a good culture means that you have a lot of great ideas. There's collaboration involved. Who's a young guy maybe to keep an eye on for a leadership role?
Well, I think it's got to be somebody who's going to be playing a big role on the team, right? Somebody that's going to be out there with those guys every single down, every single snap. I mean, the one that really jumps out is probably Riley Moss to me, Cody. And I don't know that he's necessarily that vocal type, but he feels like the kind of guy that okay, as a young player, setting the example and being around now for a couple of years, could speak into certain situations, could maybe, I try to think of who could stand in front of the team and motivate everybody. Like whose example are they trying to follow, or who are they listening to out there? I think Riley's one of those types of guys
Yes.
that he's been challenged a ton, and he's been one of those players who's responded well to it. I think Riley has earned a lot of respect from not only his teammates in Denver, but elsewhere around the league over the last year, and in terms of what he's overcome in terms of the stereotypes of that position group, and being typecast as a safety, and transitioning to the NFL, all those sorts of things. People questioning, does he have the speed to play corner? Everybody's questioning what he can do out there. And I think the way that he's responded in humility and come out there and kind of just set the example of how he plays, it's been really great to see. So I think his teammates would respond to his leadership in that way.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think you nailed it there. And I know, and I can speak for guys in that locker room, having been around them. They got Riley's back. They love Riley. He's a guy that if he has to speak up, people are going to listen. Like Riley has earned that. I think there are just a handful of guys here. And that's why I think like highlighting a roster culture, a locker room culture is so important, where you don't necessarily have a coach that sets that culture. You have a coach like Sean Payton who sets the standard for the organization, right? And with that comes, an embodiment of some pieces of culture. But ideally, you want your culture to be player-led, essentially, versus just coach-led. And I think sometimes you've seen bad examples throughout the course of history in the NFL. I think Denver's on the right track here. But Broncos country, we still got a lot to talk about here on today's episode of the show. Up next, we're going to discuss why chemistry matters for a young Broncos team, and why this Broncos team has some of those traits that we've seen in some of those special teams, like the Gary Kubiak-led teams, the Peyton Manning-led teams. What traits are those? We'll highlight that much more on today's episode, Locked on Broncos. Broncos country, today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Following a wedding, that was me. Between dining out, online shopping, paying for a wedding, or entertainment, it's easy to lose track sometimes, and that's where Monarch Money comes in, because they are your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money, it isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center that gives you all the information that you need, where you can track all your accounts, all your investments, and your spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth.
Well, Cody mentioned it. It's a complete financial command center. With Monarch Money, you get that all in one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can just use one. Use the Monarch Money app to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals that you may have. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
We're continuing our culture conversation on today's episode, Locked on Broncos, and why it matters for a young team. And this is a Broncos team that found that chemistry together last year while being written off by every national media outlet. People saying that they weren't going to win more than 5 games, that they might even be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. Well, the Broncos, they go out there and they win 10 games, and they lay stake to the claim that they're not just here to take part, they're here to take over in a sense, and that they're heading in the right direction. And culture and chemistry are a big reason for that. Sayre, let's really answer this question here. Why does chemistry matter for a young team? As we know, the Broncos, they're very young here, but they've got some pieces. They've got some veteran experience to go with some of these younger guys. But why is chemistry so important for a team that's as young as the Denver Broncos are?
I think it's so important for a number of reasons, but the number one thing is that obviously you have young guys that are working towards this common goal. I think especially now as you hear George Payton answering questions after the draft, how much does NIL complicate the evaluation process for guys coming in? One of the biggest things that he's talked about over the last couple of years is you really get a sense for which guys love the game, right? And I think that's a common thread that we've been talking about with culture. When you're talking about adults who are getting paid to do anything, how do you motivate those people to work towards a goal as opposed to just getting used to getting paid a lot of money to do something, right? And in the NFL, how easy would that be after guys are at the college level? They're already getting paid, right, Cody? Can you imagine being a millionaire at the age of 18, 19 years old? by playing football. I mean, that would be crazy to me. And then to transition to the NFL, where it used to be like that was the goal. Like, I'm going to work as hard as I can. Not everybody has the mentality of a Peyton Manning, right? Where somebody asks him, what are you going to do now that you signed your first NFL contract? And he's like, I'm going to go earn it, right? That's not the mentality of most of these guys. I mean, a lot of times it's, I'm going to buy my mom a house. I'm going to buy myself a car. I'm going to go get some nice jewelry. I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to do whatever. I mean, like fulfilling all your lifelong dreams. You've all of a sudden achieved that. And now what? Now it's like, okay, now I've got to be self-motivated to go out there and try to win. You have all these young guys that are creating this chemistry. You can speak to this too. The example that comes to mind is Bo Nix with Jarrett Stidham. These two guys are competing for a starting job in the NFL, and Jarrett loses that competition. And then he comes back the next offseason in free agency. There's chemistry between those guys that they work well together. They love working together. They love being out on the practice field together. I think there's so much intangible value in all of it.
There is. And look, while there's a competitive feel inside, a team and the culture, like obviously Stidham expressed disappointment last year when he didn't win the starting job, right? Obviously. I mean, anyone in the competition, they don't win it, they're going to express their disappointment. That's understandable. But, for a guy like Jarrett Stidham, who's been in Sean Payton's system, Jarrett was a sounding board for Bo as he was navigating, learning so much about the offense as a rookie. And even still to this day, like there's this collaboration, whereas you had a guy like Joe Flacco come in and said, I'm not here to mentor anybody. Like there's a difference between who you think are leaders and who aren't leaders. Flacco never was a good leader. And the only time we ever saw any kind of leadership fire from Flacco, what was it? After they lost the Colts game and he called out the coaches saying, we can't be scared to do this. But it's like, that's fine. But behind the scenes, you're not viewed as a leader in that locker room by the players. Bo's a leader, Jarrett's a leader. And when you have this culture, I would say, that isn't selfish, right? And this even goes back to examples from what Zach Allen said in his podcast with Chris Long, that he talked about, like, there are guys who just want to get sack numbers around the NFL. He said, but in our room, like, we're very much an unselfish group where, if I eat, I guarantee you this guy's going to eat. We're going to do things to help each other succeed. It's been a while since the Broncos have had a culture like that. And I think the last time maybe that was the case here in Denver has to be that Super Bowl 50 team where, look, you had a defense that had absolute dogs on it, right? And that was a big formula here. Offensively, even though that Denver didn't necessarily have the production that they were used to, with like when Peyton Manning in 2013, heck, even Peyton in 2014 and 2012, Peyton kind of lost a big step there in that 2015 season, and there were ups and downs. Brock Osweiler comes in. It could have been easy for that defense to say, you know what? It's us against them. We're going to do it. Instead, like in moments where the offense was struggling, the defense was like, hey, don't you guys worry. We're going to go score. We're going to get the ball back for you. We're going to be fine. Later on, after, Peyton Manning retired, remember 2017, we saw that split where it became offense versus defense. The defense is like, we're tired of carrying it. Like you had, I think it was Menelik Watson or something trying to give a speech, and they're like, shut up. That's exactly what they told him, like Akib and them. There was like some fisticuffs about to happen. So I think you look at all these examples, it is very much losing that realm of selfishness, right? Because obviously when you have individual goals as a player, making money, stats, incentives, whatever, there is a level of selfishness that you have to have, but not if it gets in the way of overall accomplishing what you want as a team. And I think that's why the Broncos are in a sustainable spot, because they haven't brought in players who are selfish in a sense that are about me. Those guys are gone. They brought in guys that are all about we. And I think that is the dynamic here that is present, that we saw with that Gary Kubiak-led team in 2015, that we saw when Peyton Manning came in. It became less about me and more about us as a team. I'm seeing that here with this Broncos team.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that it's all about the team, and it's all about you want to work together towards actually winning. Like, there are plenty of NFL teams out there who their culture is just not there. They don't have Lombardis in the trophy case. And that's not to say they can't put one in there, but I mean, how much does that loom over a franchise like Buffalo, right? Where it's like, man, we're the consistent losers at the end of the season, or, Chargers finding a way to charger, right? It doesn't matter. It's Jim Harbaugh's the coach, Brandon Staley, whoever else they've had out there. It doesn't matter. They've found a way to embrace that in a way, like without even trying. Like the Chargers are going to charge her. I just think that when you have a situation like you do in Denver, where the expectation it was really the Mike Shanahan era, Cody, that ultimately changed this culture to being something that, okay, the expectation is every year for this franchise, like, we better be contending or there's going to be unrest from the fan base. There's going to be disappointment from the ownership on down. Like, we want to be Super Bowl contenders. We don't just want to be on the right track. We're not just happy with making the playoffs. We're not just happy with having a good season every once in a while. Like, we want to be the best in the NFL. And that is something that was instilled with ownership back in the Pat Bowlen era and Mike Shanahan as the head coach. Those teams, they wanted to dominate. They wanted to be the best ever. And they did for a couple of seasons in a row. And then there was that, stretch of time after that where it felt like the Broncos were always in the mix. You get blown out in the playoffs, you make a blockbuster trade for Champ Bailey. You have issues at the quarterback position. You bring Jake Plummer in and have him have the best years of his career. You lose in the AFC Championship game, you draft another quarterback. You try and bring in more talent. I mean, it's just, that's the culture of this team now, is that you're going to do whatever it takes to win. And I think everybody from the top down has embraced it.
I think they're heading in the right direction, but ultimately, Broncos country, we want to hear from you. Do you think that the Broncos have a Super Bowl culture? Do you have a belief that they're now on a track where they have a winning culture present with Sean Payton, with the guys that we talked about, Bo Nix, Mike McGlinchey, every other player we've named? Make sure you let us know here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. That'll wrap up today's show, Broncos country. Thank you to all the everydayers out there. Make sure you become one if you're not one already by hitting that subscribe or follow button wherever you get your podcast. And for you everydayers, if you want to know what we're going to talk about on tomorrow's episode of the show, we're going to go through the Broncos' ability to build in future years. We talk so much about culture here. Well, tomorrow we're going to focus on how can the Broncos continue to sustain building that culture. What does the outlook in years ahead look like for them from a salary cap standpoint? We'll break all that down and much more on tomorrow's episode, Locked On Broncos. See you then.